My name is Patricia Rodriguez, and I am a assistant professor of politics. My uncle was when we lived in Chile. He was a member of the economic team of Salvador Allende, who was a socialist president in Chile from 1970 to 1973. And he was, in 1973, deposed through a military coup that was very brutal and violent. And he, I was only 5 at the time that it happened, but the family suffered some persecution because he refused to leave Chile. He didn't believe that anything was going to happen, that everything was going to be okay, and he stayed in Chile, hiding in friends' houses and attics and all that. And so that sort of made it so that when he finally sought exile in the Mexican embassy, there was a 5-month period in which he was just in hiding, and that made it so that a lot of police and military forces would, knock on our door, and so then my dad just had requested already a transfer to Brazil. And so that's how we ended up in Brazil. The rest of my family in Mexico, and some stayed in Chile. But I guess the political activism, I just always wanted to understand why this happened to my family and to Chile, and to someone sort of seeking change in a good way, I think. And then when I moved to Brazil at the time was also under dictatorship, but not as brutal as the Chilean one. And so growing up in Brazil was really interesting because I wanted to make sense of why the dictatorship was still there. And as a high school student, I got together with a couple friends of mine who had cameras. And went to, because I lived in the capital city in Brazil, Brasilia. And during 1985, there was a transition from dictatorship to democracy in Brazil. And I wanted to be part of it. And I took these friends to the Congress, in front of Congress, a skip school. Went in front of Congress and began to interview people. And it was really interesting because there was a lot of hope. But during the transcourse of maybe 3 hours, the whole crowd that was gathered there learned that the president had some kind of medical situation, and then in the aftermath of that he died. And so it went from hope to a lot of uncertainty. And so I wanted to understand that, and I wanted to kind of be part of understanding why there's so much inequality in Brazil. And so then I became involved with the student movement in Brazil, and that sort of was very interesting. And I guess that's kind of the reason why I think activism is important, because it brings change, and even though it's difficult, it's necessary, and it brings different voices to the foreground. So because I teach a lot of Latin American politics courses, courses on issues of development, courses on issue of human rights, and I know I've kind of connected to a lot of activists, not just here in town, but elsewhere. I know that every year there is a protest, a huge protest at the school, in front of the School of the Americas in Columbus, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And the School of the Americas is essentially a military training facility that trains police officers and military officers from Latin America in counterinsurgency type of tactics. And in the mid-1990s, it was discovered that they were also getting trained in torture techniques. There's a torture manual. This is public information and is known. And so ever since then, but before that even, there's a big movement that tries to bring attention to the fact that why is the school here? Why are they training people, especially in situations of torture? And a lot of these military leaders have gone back to their countries and have been tied to massacres and brutality, right, against civilians. And so I think that bringing attention to that through the courses and the fact that we have this protest, I think it's important for students to participate in this. Many of the issues that I defend, I guess, and that I really believe in, I think pertain to social justice issues. And we can't understand, I think, social justice issues without sort of being really involved and really talking to people, and getting different perspectives, and understanding why is it that activists do what they do. And then you can decide for yourself, is that too crazy, or is that like something that I believe in, right? But without actually kind of like experiencing these events and these protests and standing up for something you believe in, I think it makes it very hard to be engaged. And I think that students need to be engaged. It's like the future generation that can bring change about, and I think that is why I do it. You run these risks, but I think that the sense of collectivity in activism will sort of back you up, there's something there that about the networking and about the support that other activists can bring, that to me is like something that I find interesting and important.